want to take some time because we discussed a little bit before recording that I
Mhm.
was most excited about talking about really weird stuff like aliens and simulation theory and universal origins. So I
Mhm.
want to carve out a section for that because that's stuff that I love and I think, but there aren't that many people that want to talk about it. So what is your like number one theory on how everything works and what's out there?
My number one theory, I don't know, I'm torn, right?
Mm-hmm.
I 100% believe that all of these UAP sightings and stuff that we've been seeing are real, not ours, and we don't know what they are. That's where I'm at. I want to know what they are, and I don't know yet. So I've come up with three options, right, that I think are viable options. One, that they are aliens from another planet.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably my least favorite option. Number two, that they are interdimensional beings that are visiting for some reason. And three, that they are the leaders of our simulation coming back to check on us and make sure we haven't killed ourselves yet. So
I don't know. So
that's it.
what do you think about Area 51? Do you think that there's actually like some stuff out there that, you know, the government just doesn't want us to know?
You ever heard of Bob Lazar?
I think I have, yeah.
Bob Lazar claims that he worked at a place called S4, which was next to Area 51 in the same part of Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
And he claims that while working there, his job was advanced propulsion, and he was there to back engineer alien spacecraft. And he described like the way they flew, how they would. It seemed like they were just kind of tumbling through space, which is very similar to what we're seeing in those like the gimbal and the go fast videos that we've seen, and all these different things that he said were possible. Right? And he claimed that the ships were powered by an element called element 115, and it would, if we discovered it, it would be unstable. But he had in the lab, they had a stable version of it. And like 20 years later, they discovered element 115, and it was highly unstable when they found it. But theoretically, they can create a stable version. They just don't know exactly how to do it yet.
Mm-hmm.
He claims that he has part of that element that he stole from the lab, and he's constantly being raided by the FBI and all these different people, and they'll say that it's in relation to, you know, top secret information, but that's all you ever get. So he's involved in something. We don't know if he's being accurate, but he has all this knowledge. He's been in the papers for creating his own like jet vehicles. He strapped a jet engine to a Honda one time. He was in the paper for that. He worked at Los Alamos Labs, supposedly. He was supposedly he went to MIT and to Caltech, but none of his education information checks out. They say they have no clue who he is. They've never heard of him. He just doesn't exist. But he's listed in the Los Alamos Labs employee handbook for the years he claims he worked there, with his home address and phone number in the book. So there's no disputing that he worked there at some point. And he claims that he was hired on through EG&G, which is a government contractor, who has come out and has been proven to have hired people to work at Area 51 and the surrounding areas, and all this different stuff. So there's validity to his claims in some aspects, but not in others. So a lot of people discredit him as being not really who he says he was.
Mm.
But if you ever watch any body language stuff about him, he is unflinching. He tells the story like he's apprehensive to tell it, like it was a bad memory, right? That's what everybody says about him. It's like he's recounting a bad memory that he doesn't want to remember, but he can't forget. He claims that the government has tried multiple attempts on his life over this, but he keeps talking about it because as long as he's talking about it, he hopes they can't kill him because it'll look bad on the U.S. government. So he just seems like he's really scared, but trying to get the information out there enough to keep himself alive. He's never been one to go out and try to make money off of it or anything like that. So it makes me believe that he might be telling some form of the truth, right?
Yeah.
And the way he describes that the vehicles, it's like they create an anti-gravity field and they fall through gravity as they're going. That's exactly what we're seeing in all this footage that comes out. You just see, like, they'll tilt up on their sides, and it's not, you see no propulsion or anything. It's like they're just moving through space, like they're falling at a constant rate. And you can change directions and stuff because, like, if they're creating their own gravity field, it makes sense. It would also give them the ability to be transmedium, like we're seeing, where they can fly in space, air, and underwater, which is fascinating because those are completely different ways to travel that require completely different systems to maneuver, right? Mm-hmm. But if you create an anti-gravity field, then you bypass all of those requirements. And I find Bob Lazar's story in combination with the videos that we've seen to be not quite fully convincing, but enough to make me want to know more, right? And at the same time, what if they're interdimensional species, right? Or interdimensional beings, and they're moving in another dimension and just popping through ours? That would also explain a lot of it too, because they wouldn't be held to our sense of gravity and stuff. They're on a different dimension, operating under different laws. So that's always a possibility. So I don't know what they are, but we have, from the report that the Department of Defense gave and all that about the UAPs, we know that there's something out there. The government admits there's something out there, and that they don't know what it is.
So I've always maintained that my faith and my belief in the Creator is my number one, and what I'm not going to deter from. However, I will say that if someone could convince me 100% beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is no God, there is no Creator, and there was no higher power at the beginning, simulation would be my number two. And it's because it just makes too much sense. It's the most appealing. And there was a podcast episode I listened to a long time ago. It's one of my favorite things to go back and listen to. But one of my favorite creators made a comment that really sunk in and has been with me ever since. And he was like, if we have the ability to simulate life, if we can create a simulation that works and runs and, really operates the way that it's supposed to, then why could that not have happened, outside of us, and we be the simulation and we be the NPCs, exactly. And you have your celebrities, your artists, your people who are the protagonist of the simulation. And then you have us, which are just the NPCs. And it's like, if I didn't believe what I already believe, then that would be really appealing. That sounds pretty good to me.
And like the simulation theory is very interesting because like you have the biggest argument that I've seen against it is that it's impossible because there's no way that you could represent every atom in the universe that accurately, right? The universe has too much in it to where you can't accurately represent it within a simulation. But you don't have to have everything active at one time, right? We know that light operates differently when it's being observed and when it's not being observed, to the point that if you observe a particle of light, it changes its state back to its origin, wherever that origin is from, at the moment that you view it. There was a test they did, I think it was in the 70s, where they were reading how it was, the light was hitting the sheet of paper, right? And they were expecting it to be particles. They shot it through, and they looked at it. They put an electronic observer in there to see it, and it came up as an interference wave. So they took the observer away, and it was a particle again. They put the observer back in there, but they unplugged it, and it was an interference wave. So it's like things in the universe are changing if people can see them, like actively see them, or if it thinks that it is being observed. And if it doesn't think it's being observed, it's running off of a different set of rules, just like a computer program.
There are also all these weird instances that are observable, which I know, you being a person who cares about facts and answers, observable is important. But for example, the Bermuda Triangle being this kind of strange phenomenon where things disappear, or like false holes in the ground where people just kind of vanish. That's observable. There's video that shows some of that stuff happening. And a lot of times people who are more religious or spiritual will accredit some of that stuff to faith and higher power and that kind of thing. But then there are other people scientifically who will try to recreate it or explain it, and they'll sort of give credit to whatever's happening that we don't understand. There's uncanny valley stuff. There's just so much stuff like lizard people, some of it's kind of ridiculous, but there's too much for there not to be some kind of underlying thing. It's just that we might not ever be close enough to know what that underlying thing is.
Well, we don't know how vast parts of the universe functions. We have to observe things from where we are to be able to tell how they are, and a lot of things are too far away to see. But the things that are up close, we think we know what they are, but science has shown that our senses only pick up a fraction of what's actually here, what is around us. We don't see most of it. There's a lot of parts of light, infrared light, stuff that our eyes can't see. So if you think about it, like a simulation doesn't have to run all that stuff unless it's actively being viewed.
Yeah.
Video games don't do that. Why would a simulation do that?
There was something I learned from Stephen Hawking's book, Theory of Everything, or the movie was called Theory of Everything, but I also listened to the audio book. And it really stuck with me, and I wrote sorry?
I said I've read it. It's good.
Yeah, so it's something stuck with me that I mentioned in a blog post one time that I did, which was when a star explodes, what we see happening, the actual explosion of the star, happened like in the past. Like what we're seeing is not happening in real time because it's so far away from us that when we see it, we're seeing something that happened, say minutes or hours prior. Which is really weird because that just throws everything we understand about time kind of for a loop. That things that are happening, time is this factor that's not really measurable. It's kind of measurable, and we kind of have a sense of how it works, but really it's extremely subjective, and that's something that kind of floats into that theory, I think, too, where, as far as time is concerned, that time is kind of its own operator that operates at different levels in different places.
Well, like I was telling you about the experiment where they were observing the particle of light. They tried it with starlight, right? From it was, I can't remember how far away it was, but it was decently far. And they measured it when it hit the paper, and it hit as particles. They measured it when it hit the paper with an observer, and it was an interference wave, like they would expect, right? But that was starlight. Said it's all of its qualities and everything were set when it was emitted from the star, millions of light years away.
Yeah.
But as we're observing it, it's actively changing its state from the origin. So time is irrelevant.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was getting at. Like time itself, you almost can't plug it into the equation. You almost have to look at everything outside of it. And, I understand that simulation theory and that kind of thing is sort of hard to grasp and far-fetched and really something to play with more than something to plug in as a scientific fact. But we all want to explain things, and we all want an answer for the way things work. And more often than not, it kind of fits pretty well.
Yeah. Nick Bostrom and his simulation argument. Have you ever looked into that? Let me pull it up right quick so I can read it to you. He has there are three parts of the argument. Okay, so the simulation argument breaks down as The fraction of human-level civilizations that reach a post-human stage, that is, one capable of running high-fidelity ancestor simulations, is very close to zero. Or, the fraction of post-human civilizations that are interested in running simulations of their evolutionary history or variations thereof is very close to zero. Or, the fraction of all people with our kind of experiences that are living in a simulation is very close to 1. So either no one has ever decided that they want to do a simulation, a very small group of them, which could still be millions because you're looking at all the possible civilizations in the universe, decided that that was a bad idea, right? Or we are definitely living in a simulation because there are people that are more advanced than us in the universe based on sheer numbers and the age of our planet and our civilization, and that they have decided to create simulations, and we are definitely one of them. So, like, it's a little out there, but I get his point, right? So,
yeah,
if we're going to reach a point in our civilization where we will create simulations, then it's only expected and right that they would create multiple simulations of multiple different things. And at that point, the probability of us being in the original simulation line is very close to zero.
Yeah.
It's just... So, it's a scary thought, especially when you see things like the deja vu and stuff like that, and your mind is just like, oh, this is familiar. And there's that misfire, right? I've always thought that was like the computer resetting itself for a split second and picking back up at the last save state. And you're like, oh, something's different.
Well, there's when you start factoring in consciousness and, you know, different aspects of like psychotherapy and just there's a whole new world to kind of where you can plug these ideas in. But like dream sequences where you sort of are aware that something happened and you remember part of it and then it actually happens, or something like you're saying deja vu, you know, there's not, I mean, the answer is there is no answer. So what can we do to, you know, provide some context and fill in the blank there? And this kind of works. Like, what if it's just a reset? What if it's just an error? What if it's just our coding and programming not functioning correctly? You know, what if everything's already laid out from beginning to end and we're just getting these little glimpses along the way that are mistakes, you know? So it is fascinating. You know, I like I said, I can't say that I buy in or believe it, but I'd kind of like to, if my first fallback didn't work, my first initial belief didn't work, I would definitely fall back to it and explore it further because, you know, it does fascinate me and it explains a lot of things that don't have those answers.
Yeah, and like, there's no way that we can know because we are not technologically advanced to create our own simulation, to even know if it's possible to do so. But if by now we're already trying to rationalize whether this is possible, someone in the future is going to figure out a way to make it possible because that's just the nature of humans. If somebody has the idea, someone else is going to figure out how to do it somewhere down the line. Like, we've had people that have described in science, they described, you know, experiments they would have liked to have done, but science wasn't up to par yet. And then when it was, somebody was like, hey, let me do that experiment. So I guarantee you at some point in our timeline, someone's going to make a simulation just because there's so much interest in it now, right? There's people writing books
we have
about
the
it.
Sims. We have the Sims. So, like, you know, there are some situations where we've kind of done it, you know, like they're not real people that are living and breathing, but they're there. They exist. They're characters and they're ones and zeros, but they're moving, they're living, they do things. It's kind of weird.
And AI in video games, you know, like, you've got people that wander around the city all day aimlessly. That's what they do. That's their lot in life, is to wander aimlessly. But even, you know, think about today, like how vast video game technology has grown. Like, you can create things that are almost indistinguishable from real life. And computing power doubles every 18 months. That's the rule. You know? It's been proven time and time again. Every 18 months, the computing power doubles. So how many more cycles do we need before we can create that? Before we can have chips that can power that, graphics cards that can push that? we already have graphics cards now, like I don't know if you've looked at them, but the GTX 4090, it's so large that it has to stay outside of your tower. You can't fit it in any computer tower, and they are melting. They are so powerful that they have to have their own cooling system, and if anything tweaks with the cooling system, they melt themselves. So like our technology is growing faster than we can really keep up with. So at what point do we reach that either we realize that this is something that we can never do, or that we realize it's inevitable, and then it really becomes a question of, have we done this before? Has humanity gone down this path at some point? Whether, even if it's not humanity, even if it's another culture, like are we the simulation of someone else? And like we've reached the point where the simulation has wrapped back around to itself,
I have a VR headset, Oculus headset, and I like a lot of augmented reality stuff. It's fascinating, mostly for fitness games, but I do play a couple of fun things in there, and augmented reality on our phones. And I do GIS for a living, so I build online mapping systems and online maps and things like that. And we're talking about an augmented reality tool right now for just pushing our structures, our polylines, and everything where you can see them kind of in the real world. And it's happening fast. Like that stuff's popped up over the past 3 to 4 years. And I can't imagine in 10 years from now how accurate it's going to be to real life.
Yeah. And like at that point, you really have to ask yourself, like, what is real and what isn't? At some point, the human brain's going to have problems trying to process that. And I think we're already seeing that a little bit in society today. Think about the rise in, mental disorders and stuff, depression, anxiety. Like the world around us is growing too fast, in my view, for our minds to handle it. Right? Life is changing too quickly for us to adapt to it at this point. So we're seeing problems with it already. And I just feel like they're going to be exacerbated as time goes on, Like I don't see there's an off ramp for us. It's either going to go really well or really poorly, depending on how well we adapt.
Are we really ready for the Neuralink?
That is terrifying. Okay.
Yeah. That's kind of what I describe it when I talk about it. I'm like, it's kind of scary. Like I can already contact somebody in another country in another time zone and have my full like body and face and everything right in front of them. I don't want to be able to send them messages with my mind. No, thank you.
Right. And like that's so far from the human experience to this date. Like, where do we go from that? How does that affect the rest of our lives? How many problems are we going to have because that stuff's short circuits and they send the wrong message to the wrong person, or our thoughts get projected into someone else's mind? Like, that's going to be bad for everyone, because everybody has those intrusive thoughts that they don't want. And if the Neuralinks is just like, hey, there's another user right there. This is shareable data. Send.
Well, it's also because, we're going to have the Neuralink kind of around the same time or the same decade where we get people sort of transmitting their consciousness into chips and stuff to like live infinitely. So like, just think about your loved one is now in a computer on a hard drive, and then all of a sudden the hard drive dies and then they're really gone. It's not like a death where you had cancer or you had heart disease and we had a mourning process and a funeral. Nope, you just wake up and the hard drive's dead and they're gone.
Now, would that be considered murder?
Well, if you destroyed it, potentially. It's like there are so many moral implications that I don't want to solve. It's frightening.
It is terrifying. And art is all about what it is to be human, right? Like that's the point of art, is to explore what it means to be a human and how to better yourself going further. But what is the purpose of art if there is no humanity, right? So if we're all simulations and we're running, predestined code, right? It's pre-designed, pre-written, and we're just figuring it out as we go. We think that it's our own free will. What is the purpose of art at that point,
Yeah.
Because it's not expressing humanity, but expressing just code. It's like AI art today, right? That shit is terrifying. You can put on, like, it makes beautiful art with just a few keywords, right? And a lot of times it's fairly close to what you were envisioning it was going to be anyway. But it's odd. It's a little off. You look at them and like, oh, that's not really a face, is it? It looks like a face, though.
Yeah, that's what I meant when I was talking about Uncanny Valley. Like these robots that are now hostesses and like they work at hotels and they work at airports and stuff. Don't bring that stuff over here until I'm dead, please, because I don't want to deal with any of that.
Did you ever play Detroit Being Human?
I've heard of the Being Human games. Isn't that like a series?
No, it's just one.
Oh, okay. No.
You should play it. You play as 3 separate AI that gain consciousness and break away from the system. And you also play as a detective that works with one of them, and he was becoming friends with this one. And the whole game is about, questioning what it means to be human. Is it something biological, or is it just sentience, right? And I've always found that stuff fascinating. And I don't know the answer to that question, right? Because if an AI can think on its own and make its own rational decisions, not based on pre-written code, then what does that mean? Like, how does that affect everything else? Do they get the same rights as humans? Like, I would assume they would, but science fiction and the way we treat other people that we already know are 100% definitely humans tells me that that's not going to be how it goes, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. It's just a weird thought.